Good evening. My name is Tony Johnson, and I'm the one who will be conducting tonight's AAT session on teaching critical thinking skills through language arts and social studies. In doing so this evening, we'll be looking at primarily a particular program or approach to critical thinking, that is philosophy for children. To assist me in this endeavor, we have with us from area high schools several high school students who have volunteered their time from their busy schedules to assist us in that. So at this time, I'd like for them to introduce themselves, and then we'll move on, begin. Okay?
My name is Ronald Moran, and I'm from Burbank High School.
My name is Ana Maria Rabago, and I'm from Memorial High School.
Frank Tessina from Memorial High School.
Hi, I'm from Memorial High School. My name is Santa Ana Hernandez.
Hi, I'm from Burbank High School. My name is Mike Robas III.
Okay, thank you all for coming. I'd like to say, too, that one of the reasons we asked these particular students to come is that they are planning to be, or at least they have some interest in becoming teachers, so we hope they'll continue in that dream or quest. I'd like to begin, as they say, at the beginning, and since this is an AAT session, we need to have a pre-assessment. So we'll take about 10 minutes to engage in that. So I hope everyone's ready, and if you are, I'll give you a few moments to get ready, and then I will give you some questions that you need to respond to. Okay, let's begin. Question number 1. In one sentence, define critical thinking. I'll repeat the question. In one sentence, define critical thinking. Question number 2. Is it always possible to distinguish fact from opinion? I'll repeat. Is it always possible to distinguish fact from opinion? Briefly explain your answer. Question number 3. Define an analogy and indicate whether analogical reasoning is more inductive or deductive. I'll repeat that slowly. Define an analogy and indicate whether analogical reasoning is more inductive or deductive. I'll repeat the question one more time, since that's a long one. Define an analogy and indicate whether analogical reasoning is more inductive or deductive. And the next question, question number 4, I'm going to put a overhead and ask you a question related to it. Okay, let's take just the first 3, A, B, and C of this particular overhead. And the question is, indicate whether the following are valid or invalid syllogisms. So we're doing A, B, and C. Indicate whether the following are valid or invalid syllogisms. Okay, question number 5 will be a similar question, or at least the same format, replacing that particular visual with one additional one. And the question is, what, if any, reliable conclusions can be drawn from the following? And again, let's just do A and B. What, if any, reliable conclusions can be drawn from the following? And the following is A and B. Okay, and the final question will be, again, a similar kind where you need to read and then respond. In this question, I'd like you to look at the paragraph, disregard the information at the top of the visual, but just read the paragraph and then identify and explain the ambiguous terms in the paragraph. Identify and explain the ambiguous terms in the paragraph. I believe we have a question. Yes, go ahead.
Hello?
Yes.
This is, excuse us, but this is Tucker County, West Virginia.
Okay.
And we've been having some problems with our talkback equipment, and this is just a test. But we do have some participants who may have some questions later.
Okay, feel free at any time.
Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, let's continue then and let this conclude the pre-assessment. If the facilitators would make whatever arrangements is necessary regarding the test, then we will proceed. I would be surprised, and I would certainly welcome any comments you might have, but I'd be surprised if you felt comfortable with some of those questions. And I hope by the end of the 6 hours in which we'll be presenting this, and you and I will be interacting along with our students, that at least you'll be better able to answer some of those kinds of questions. One other phone call. Yes.
Yes. When the last person called in, they took the visual down, and we had some people here who weren't quite through with that. We wonder if you could put that up until we can finish.
Okay, certainly. Can we put the visual back up? And give you a few more moments with that. Okay, let's go ahead and continue. You may not have had a chance to read that as carefully as you like, but perhaps as the hours go on, we'll be able to come back to some of these kinds of things. If those who are responsible for taking up the exams or the assessment would do so, then we'll proceed. All right. The question, I guess, is where to begin when you talk about critical thinking in the language arts and in social studies. I would like to begin this afternoon by sharing with you a cartoon. Perhaps it's one that some of you are familiar with. It is a cartoon by Tom Batiuk. Again, I don't know, at least here in San Antonio, it's quite prevalent in our papers. It's Funky Winkerbean. For those of you familiar with it, you'll know that Funky Winkerbean is very much about high schools. And many of the activities in the comic strip relate to the marching band. and it's this one in particular that I want to share with you, at least in part because what I'm suggesting is that philosophy is much related to critical thinking. But let me try to share with you and describe this particular little comic strip, the particular one that I want to share with you. It seems that we have in this particular strip a student, and we know it's a band student because of the outfit, the costume. The student has the plumed hat, and it's hard to tell exactly where it's a boy or a girl, but nevertheless the student is reading the student curriculum guide and comes upon in the student curriculum guide a description for Philosophy 1, which has a prerequisite, which is 5 hours of sitting around doing nothing. Now, I'm going to assume that all of you out there in TV land have had some point in your educational career an experience where you sat around and did nothing for 5 hours. If not, perhaps you would not qualify for this particular course. At any rate, the course description after that prerequisite. Philosophy 1 is where you learn how the great thinkers of the past view man's existence, such as Descartes, who said, "I think, therefore I am." It turns out he was right, because he stopped thinking a while back, and now he no longer is. In case you're wondering, that's supposed to be a joke. It's hard to know whether you get a laugh or not in this kind of a setting. All right, assuming that it did get at least a mild chuckle, let me continue with the similar, or actually another day's cartoon. Same format, same student reading same curriculum guide. This time comes to Philosophy 2, which also has a prerequisite, which is a bottle of No-Dos. Now, if anyone brought No-Dos to this session, you might want to share it with someone else who's sitting near you. Then the course description. Philosophy 2 is where you learn about the contributions of such great thinkers as Plato, Aristotle, Augustine, Rousseau, Hegel, Descartes, and Dehorst. It is generally agreed that Dehorst is the greatest philosopher who ever lived, but some still insist on putting Descartes before Dehorst. Well, we got a laugh from the cameraman, so maybe it's not too bad. Okay. Now, I know this is a rather silly little cartoon, but I think it suggests something about philosophy that is all too common, and that is that it's something that only people like me do, who's a professor of philosophy of education at UTSA, at a university. And I suggest to you that's not necessarily the case. It also at least suggests to me that, or at least I think it illustrates in part, that philosophy can be very useful in helping us think more critically. And I'd like to talk a little bit about that. Basically, the question is this: what is philosophy, and what, if anything, does it have to do with critical thinking? And in some sense, how can that then be related to and connected with language arts and social studies, in part our reason for being here this evening? Well, in an attempt to deal with that, I like to share and quote the famous American philosopher who defined philosophy, and I quote, as an uncommonly stubborn attempt to think clearly. Now, I don't know about you, but for me, even though I think I have a PhD and all that kind of stuff, but nevertheless, even with advanced degrees, there's times when I need to struggle to think clearly. It doesn't come easily for any of us. But then the question becomes, what does it mean to think clearly and critically? How can this be fostered? How do you define critical thinking? Is it formal logic? One of the things we'll do this afternoon, and as I think you probably already get some sense of from the questions I ask, is we'll be going over some formal logic. But critical thinking in and of itself is not formal logic, nor is philosophy solely formal logic. Is it identifying and avoiding the multitude of informal fallacies in perhaps not this afternoon, but the next Thursday, we'll be looking at some of those informal fallacies. But again, that itself, by itself, is not critical thinking. Is it problem solving? Well, yes and no. In a sense, critical thinking is all of these and none of these. It is not a panacea. Currently, there's a lot of interest in critical thinking. It's the contemporary buzzword, but it won't solve all the problems that confront education today. It will not, and I emphasize this, it will not lead us to certainty, but it will and can enable us to learn from our mistakes. And I think this really gets at the heart of what critical thinking is. That is, that we can identify and then learn from our mistakes as we struggle, to paraphrase William James, to continually improve our thinking. From my point of view, critical thinking can best be summarized by the Socratic dictum, which many of us, I'm sure, are familiar with, that the unexamined life is not worth living. In many ways, Socrates, the ancient Greek philosopher, the gadfly of Athens, personifies the ideal critical thinker. Now, Socrates made no claim to wisdom, great or small. He says, I don't know. He says, I'm not wise. I never claimed to be wise. Yet he was, in his own day, thought to be one of the wisest of all. There's a little story that I think is illustrative here, and it explains the situation fairly well. Some of you are familiar with the story about mirror, mirror on the wall, who's the fairest of them all, right? Well, in a sense, a similar sort of story is that a friend of Socrates once went to the oracle at Delphi in northern Greece and asked that oracle what or who was the wisest person alive. And the oracle unequivocally, very quickly responded that Socrates. It was no doubt. Once Socrates' friends relayed this information to him, he denied it. He said, that can't be, because I proclaim to have no wisdom, great or small. But it did give him a quest, a mission for his life, a way of something to do with his life. He decided that what he needed to do was to prove the oracle wrong. So he set about, over the next many, many years, going about asking all of these supposedly wise individuals, these statesmen, these politicians, these generals, all of whom claimed to know, to be wise. And as he asked them questions, and he could be somewhat less than kind in the way he asked questions, he came to know that those who claimed to know really didn't know. After doing this time and time again, and after repeatedly finding that these politicians, statesmen, generals did not really know, even though they claimed to know, Socrates finally agreed that perhaps the oracle was right. At least he knew that he knew nothing, whereas all of these others claimed to know and didn't. So in a sense, he was wiser than they, because at least he knew he didn't know. Now, in a sense, this kind of negative view of critical thinking is, I think, a useful one. It can help us in understanding and improving on our thinking process. It will not lead us to certainty necessarily, although it will help us substantiate our positions, our assertions, what we stand for. Okay. In a sense, we could do a lot worse than to emulate Socrates. And another thing about Socrates I think is important, and it relates very much to this process we call, or this thing we call, critical thinking, and that is the infamous, in a sense, Socratic dictum. Now, one might argue that perhaps we shouldn't try to do that, because in a sense that Socratic dictum, that Socratic method, the asking of questions, didn't do him much good. I mean, after all, that led to his being condemned to death by the Athenian democracy. But nevertheless, it has a long history. The notion of asking good questions and right questions is an important one. And I think that's again, the issue of questioning, the importance of questioning is most critical to this process we call critical thinking. Okay. Again, I would encourage you, any of you out there, if you, at some point I'm not clear or you don't understand, or if you just want to make a comment relevant to what we're doing here, don't hesitate to call in, because we're going to be going through some things, and we're going to be working with the students in a few moments, and things that I think will be interesting, but may not always be immediately clear. So don't hesitate to ask. Okay. Well, with that brief introduction, I'd like to focus on the asking of right questions. And I'm going to ask just at least to perhaps for some of you out there to call in. And I'm going to call some names, and hopefully if you're there you can call in and you can respond to the question I ask you. First off, let me ask that Tina Dodson, who I believe is in the Allen ISD, if she would call in and respond to the following question, and tell me if there's anything at all wrong with this question. Okay? And the question is, what kind of airplane did Alexander the Great fly in? I'll repeat it. What kind of airplane did Alexander the Great fly in? Okay? So Tina, if you would, Tina Dodson, if you'd call in, and we'll see what you think of that. All right, I'm going to ask someone else to call in while Tina is getting to the phone. Let's see. How about Dartha Hargrove, who is at the Dumas ISD? Dartha Hargrove, would you respond to the following question? How much did Caesar weigh? Or I guess I should say, is there anything wrong with the question? And the question is, how much did Caesar weigh? Okay. One final question for the audience out there. Would Jennifer Deuel at the Lone Oak ISD respond to this question and tell me what you think of it. How does a bird fly when it is standing still? Okay. Now, while we're waiting for those folks to get to the phones and call in, I'm going to move over here with the students and ask them some of the same similar kinds of questions and get their responses. Okay? So let me move over here. Okay. We'll let you go, jump on this one, anyone who wants to. We won't call on a particular person. Question is anything wrong with these questions? How old was Abraham Lincoln at birth? Anybody want to jump on that one? How old was Abraham Lincoln at birth?
Is there a classification for that?
Well, is it a good question?
No.
It's not a good question. Why isn't it?
Not enough information. It's asking you something relevant. It's asking you, how old was he when he was born? He was just born. 2 minutes, an hour. It's not giving you a specific time.
Okay. Well, it is at birth. Isn't that fairly specific?
What?
But your points, you're getting to the problem. Let me ask you this question. How old were you at birth?
Not old enough to be one.
Okay. Let me ask another question. Do we have a phone call? I thought we had one. Okay. Let me ask another one. Maybe we'll come back to this. How old was Napoleon?
At what time of year?
A little louder.
At what time of year?
At what time of year?
Like, you ain't being specific.
We're not being specific enough. I'm not being specific enough. I can't talk either. Okay. It's vague. It's imprecise. One might say, how old was Napoleon when he, in 1815 at the Battle of Waterloo? There's not enough information.
It's too open.
It's too vague. Very good. Okay. One more. Or, well, we might go more than one. Why is the sea boiling hot? Now again, I'm assuming that there may be something wrong with the question. I mean, that's kind of why is the sea boiling hot? Anna?
It's not cold enough.
It's not cold enough. Okay. What do you know about the sea?
It isn't hot.
It's not hot.
It's very cold.
It's pretty cold. At least in places it is. This time of year in certain places it's very cold.
And the sun doesn't reach the bottom.
I'm sorry?
And the sun doesn't reach the bottom.
The sun doesn't reach the bottom, so it's real cold the further down it is. Okay. In effect, it's an incorrect assumption. The question assumes something that is not true. All right. Okay. Do we have any call-ins? Any of those people? Nobody's calling in. Maybe they're stumped on it too, just as you are. Okay. Not really. You did pretty well. Okay. Let's go back to the questions I began with then, and see if we can deal with them. Perhaps the students can help me out this, or help the people out there who aren't comfortable answering the question. Let's take the first one. What kind of airplane did Alexander the Great fly in? What's wrong with that?
There was no airplanes back then.
Okay, there's no airplanes back then. We all know that. Alexander the Great was back during the time of Aristotle and those guys, back 2,000 years ago or so, or more than that. Didn't have airplanes in those days. It's an incorrect assumption, in a sense, just like the one, why is the sea boiling hot, is an incorrect assumption. Okay, let's use the other one. And again, this is very much like the one we talked about earlier. How much did Caesar weigh?
At what time of his life?
At what time? When he was right after 1 year old, right before he crossed the Rubicon, before Brutus, did him in, we need more information. It's too vague. It's not a good question. And then the third one. We still don't have anybody out there who's I don't mean to limit the call-ins to just those that I called out. You can, any of you want to respond to any of these, feel free to do so. Okay, the third one that I began with. How fast does a bird fly when it's standing still?
It
Doesn't
fly.
Fly when it's standing
It
still.
doesn't fly when it's standing still. Well, that's very, it's a silly question. It contradicts itself. Okay, so we got the idea. Let me ask you one more, and then I think you might like it. Again, the question is there anything wrong with this question? Can people dream that they're having a dream?
Yeah.
Yes.
That's possible.
It's possible. Okay, how do you know? No, we won't get into that. You can always ask the next question. Okay, there's nothing wrong with that question. It makes sense. The point is that it's important to be able to distinguish between good questions and bad questions. And at least those are three kinds of questions that we illustrated that are really not very good. That is, those that are based upon an incorrect assumption, those in which the terms are vague, or what they're asking is vague, you need more information, and sometimes questions contradict themselves. Okay? All right. Now, what I'd like to do then, well, I don't need to stand up or sit down for this. What I'd like to do to illustrate again the importance of asking right questions is to ask the students to participate in a little game that we want to play. And I'm going to need 2 volunteers. Actually, I'm going to need 3 volunteers, but we can let the third person remain sitting. We need 2 detectives, and we've kind of set this up a little bit ahead of time so that we know who the detectives are. But the game itself we haven't set up. So Miguel and Santa have agreed. Okay, so if you would, as detectives, take off your mics and go outside the studio for just a moment. Okay. 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 It'll be just a second. This is live television, so it's not totally rehearsed. Okay. And now I need one of the other remaining students to volunteer to be an accomplice in a crime. Okay?
Be the accomplice.
Ronald, is that right?
Yes.
Okay. If you'd come up here, can you close the door now so that they can't hear what's going on outside? Okay, can you stand up? I'll move over so that you won't have to move that far. What we're going to try to do, Ronald, is you and I are going, one of us is going to commit a crime, okay? Do you want to commit the crime or do you want me to?
I'll commit it.
Okay, why don't you just drop this material to the floor? Okay, that's a real dastardly deed. Everyone saw it. He did it, right? Now, also, Ronald, one of us has to tell the truth, always tell the truth to any question asked, and one of us has to lie. So do you want to tell the truth or do you want to lie?
I'll lie.
Okay, now remember, any question they ask you, you lie. Now, I want to say, first off, we're not suggesting that anybody, that lying is a necessary tool for critical thinking. Just say that outright. I'm kidding, of course. But for the game, you always lie to any question, and I'll always tell the truth. Okay? Is that clear? All right. So what's going to happen, we're going to bring them back in, and we're going to tell them that the crime has been committed, and we're going to tell them what the crime was, that is dropping the notebook or the material on the floor. And then we're going to tell them that one of us did it, and that one of us always tells the truth, and one of us always lies. And we're going to give them 2 questions, and only 2 questions, to come up without any doubt which one of us did this dastardly deed. I want you to stay right here for a moment. Could you bring in the 2 detectives, please, over side? Give them just a moment to get set up here. Okay. Our 2 detectives. Okay. A crime has been committed. The crime that has been committed is that this notebook on the floor was dropped, a real dastardly deed. One of us in the front of the room, standing up in here, committed this deed. One of us always tells the truth, the other always lies. Now your task, should you decide to undertake it, and actually you've already decided, we don't give you that choice here, is to determine without any shadow of doubt, beyond not guess but know, which one of us committed this dastardly deed. Now you are to accomplish this task, that is, to come to this kind of certainty using 2 and only 2 questions. So you might want to put your heads together and talk and try to determine which questions to ask. Now I'll repeat the information that is given. The crime has been committed. One of us standing committed the crime. One of us always tells the truth, the other always lies. Any shadow of a doubt, your task is to determine which one of us did this dastardly deed.
Do you have to like trap them? Because one of them will show the truth and one of them will die. So would you ask them?
They don't tell you which one lied.
Well, we know their names, so we ask them what's their name.
You ask them what's his name. I ask them what's his name.
Okay. What's your name?
What is my name? My name is Tony Johnson.
What's your name?
My name is Joe Castro.
That's your 2 questions. You used up your question. No, I'm kidding. Technically you have.
Mine.
No, together. You're supposed to have 2
okay.
together, not?
But that was our question.
What?
That was our question.
That was your 2 questions? Okay, now which one of us did it then if you used your 2 questions?
Yeah.
How do you know?
Well, one of you...
Wait.
One... Go
Hey,
ahead.
I think he did it. The one to tell the truth.
Why do you think I did it? I mean, I'm a truth-telling person. I would never do such a dastardly deed.
And he's always lying.
But then again...
But he was lying about his name, so he could lie about it. He could say he didn't run
You
a
should have asked the 2 questions to the one person, ask the name, and then ask if they did it. And if the name is wrong, automatically you ask them, well, did you drop it? They say, well, I dropped it. Then he's lying.
Say that one more time, please. I didn't hear you.
They should have asked the 2 questions to one person. If the person says that the correct name, they go ahead and ask them, well, did you drop it? If it's the correct name, then you're saying the truth, and whatever you say.
All right, try that out. Ask me the question on it, since you've go through what you just described by asking questions.
What is your name?
My name is Tony Johnson.
Did you drop the book?
No, I did not.
Then your name is Tony Johnson, and that means you're telling the truth. So if you did not drop the book, it was him.
Okay. Does that make sense?
Mm-hmm.
Okay, very, very good. The point is, thank you for doing that. The point of the game, really there's a number of points that I think are appropriate to talk about here, and that is, one, we're dealing with what is known as deductive reasoning. If you're given certain information and you follow certain procedures, and you assume that the certain information you're given is true, then you can arrive at certainty. As Anna pointed out, by distinguishing which one of us told the truth and which one of us didn't, then by asking a question that she already knew the answer to, she knows my name, she knows who I am. So she could ask me my name, and if I said something other than my name, she'd know I'd be lying. If I answered my name, then she would know that I lost my train of thought. But anyway, if I answered truthfully, then she'd know that whatever question she asked me if I was the one who did the dastardly deed. If I said no, assuming she knew now that I was telling the truth, then it had to be the other person. Lawyers use this kind of reasoning all the time. It's as common as breathing in some cases. Now, the game, silly as it is, I think illustrates a number of things. One, it also, and one of the things that I try to suggest, and would suggest to you trying to teach critically out there in your particular classes, is that you get students to work together, that you try to build a sense of community, that you don't make critical thinking a competitive enterprise. It needs to be more than that. Okay. That's one point. The community, the sense of sharing, of cooperating, the notion that one head or 2 heads or 3 heads is better than one. And again, the focus on deductive reasoning as one kind and only one kind of reasoning. As we go on this evening, we'll look at deductive reasoning in a rather detailed way, and we'll try to point out some limitations to it as well. That obviously it depends upon whether or not the beginning statements are true, the givens, if you will, if they're really true. If not, then even though it might be logically sound, it will not be very helpful. And we'll, again, try to illustrate that. But one of the things I wanted to talk about before we get and begin to work with the students on some material is to describe those materials. The program that I at least want to share with you this evening, or use to illustrate some points this evening, is a program entitled Philosophy for Children. It was developed by a professor of philosophy at Columbia University, or at least who used to be at Columbia University. That man is Matthew Lipman. And if I can just briefly describe the background of the program. In the 1960s, Professor Lipman, teaching undergraduate students at Columbia in the field of logic and aesthetics, became very, what's the right word, alarmed or upset when his own students, his college students, did not seem to care about philosophy, had trouble with logic, were frightened away by this process of thinking that he thought and believed was as common as breathing. Well, the more he thought about this, the more he came to realize that part of the problem was that by the time students got to the college level, they had learned from, in some instances from their own educational experiences by going to school, that asking questions, that thinking, that being logical was not always appropriate. It was not why the answer was correct that teachers often wanted. It was the correct answer. And if the student could get the correct answer, they didn't care. The teachers, the institution, the school, didn't always care if they understood why the answer was correct. So Lippmann, thinking this way, or at least as he began to develop this position, began to think, well, why not introduce philosophy earlier in the educational enterprise? And someone suggested to him, as he began discussing these ideas with others, why not use the story told as a child might tell it as the vehicle for introducing the philosophical enterprise into the elementary and secondary school curricula. So with that idea in mind, Matt Lippmann went to work, and he wrote a novel, what I call a pedagogical novel, for and about children. This novel was called Harry Stottlemyre's Discovery, and it was first written in the late 60s. It has gone through many revisions since then, but that was the initial publication of the novel. What happened in Harry Stottlemyre's Discovery, and by the way, Harry Stottlemyre, if you take away the H, sounds almost like Aristotle Meyer. You take off the H in the Meyer and you got Aristotle, a little play on words. But nevertheless, this first novel was aimed at 5th and 6th grade students, and it sought or attempted to introduce them to both formal and informal rules of reasoning. And we'll come back to that in just a moment. After having developed this novel, Professor Lippmann went into a classroom of 5th grade students and began teaching the novel to them, or using the novel to teach. And he found that the kids liked it. He then developed a manual with exercises to kind of reinforce the ideas introduced there. And before long, he had put together basically an entire curriculum dealing with the reasoning skills at the 5th and 6th grade level. Subsequently, after some initial successes in this level, he wrote additional novels, actually sequels to the Harry Stottlemyre's Discovery novel, including a novel entitled Lisa, who's one of the characters that we'll soon find in Harry, Suki, Mark. These 3 sequels would focus on particular kinds of reasoning skills. And these were the first efforts that Lippmann made beyond Harry Stottlemyre. Beginning in the late 70s and early 80s, Professor Lippmann shifted his focus, and instead of extending the curriculum from the 5th and 6th grade level upward, he decided to try to develop material available for and accessible to earlier age students. And the first work, and I would argue one of the best, is called Pixie, which is a novel about a 9-year-old girl, 8-year-old girl, and her encounter with stories and mystery creatures. And it's a very delightful little story. There's also a novel for 3rd and 4th grade students called Keo and Gus, where Gus is a blind little girl and Keo is a sighted child, and the two of them learn how each one perceives the world differently, one as a sighted child and one as a blind child. The point I want to make with all this is that there is a substantial body of material, virtually at present, almost from 1st grade through the 12th grade, to engage children in the philosophical enterprise, this questioning mode, this wondering at the world. And they've been used, at least certainly the Harry Stottlemyre's Discovery material, the Pixie material, and many of the others in schools throughout the United States and across and throughout the world. What we want to do tonight, and I want to move to that fairly quickly because I'm sure you're tired of hearing me talk, and I'm getting tired of talking. What we want to do is to demonstrate this approach, which has been used, as I say, in language arts, social studies, and classrooms throughout the country, by having the students participate with me in looking at a novel directed at adolescents and in some cases adults. It really is a version, an adult version of Harry Stottlemyre's Discovery, and it's called Harry Prime, P-R-I-M-E. Even though the skills and the reasoning skills introduced here are basically the same as introduced in the 5th and 6th grade level, I might also add that these skills are the kinds of things that you would encounter in many of your critical thinking skills courses at the college level, including Introductory to Logic and other kinds of philosophy courses. So it's not that the content is inappropriate. It's just that the vehicle has been changed to represent a more adult audience. The story has changed a little bit. We will focus tonight on formal reasoning. That is formal logic. There'll be other kinds of things we'll do, but we'll focus on that. And then in Thursday night, we'll look at some of the more informal kinds of skills. Okay. Enough said. It's better to show you rather than to tell you. So with that, I'd like for us, with the students' assistance, of course, look at the first chapter of Harry Prime, again, the adult version of the Harry Stottlemyre's Discovery material. And if we can, we'll begin with that. Excuse me, and let me get over here with... Okay, Ronald, would you begin first? And let me add before we begin, is what we'll be doing is asking the students to read paragraph by paragraph. The reason that we do that, or the reason that is suggested, is to try to emulate the process of dialogue. And the paragraph is as close as we can come in using a narrative style to so emulate that dialogue. So we'll ask the students to read, taking turns, round robin, and I'll participate too, so I get to read too, guys and gals, by paragraph. And then once we finish, then I'll begin asking some questions, and I think you'll find it, hopefully find it interesting. So Ronald, why don't you begin with...
It probably wouldn't have happened if Harry hadn't fallen asleep in the TEL class that evening. TEL stood for Thinking and Learning Environments.
Well, if he didn't really fall asleep either, his mind just wandered off. The teacher, Kevin Bradley, everyone called him Kevin, had been talking about the solar system. He'd been talking about how all the planets revolve around the sun, and Harry just stopped listening, because all at once he had this picture in his mind of the great, flaming sun and all the little planets spinning steadily around it.
Suddenly, Harry knew that Kevin was looking directly at him. Harry heard Kevin address him, "Harry Prime, can you tell us what it is that has a long tail and revolves around the sun once every 77 years?"
Harry realized he had no idea of the answer Kevin expected. A long tail? For a moment he played with the idea of saying, a dog star? Harry remembered his daughter once reading to him for the child's book of knowledge that the star named Sirius was called the dog star. But he was afraid that Kevin wouldn't find such an answer very funny.
Kevin didn't have much of a sense of humor, but he was patient. Harry knew Kevin would wait a few seconds for Harry to figure out something out.
Okay. Harry could still hear Kevin saying, all planets revolve about the sun. And this thing with a tail, it also goes around the sun. Could it also be a planet? It seemed worth a try. A planet, he asked rather doubtfully.
Harry wasn't prepared for the laughter from the class. If he had been paying attention, he would have heard Kevin say that the thing in the question was Halley's Comet. Comets go around the sun just as planets do, Kevin had said, but they definitely are not planets.
Fortunately, the class was over at that point, but as Harry rode the subway home, he still felt badly about not having been able to answer Kevin correctly.
Also, he was puzzled. How had he gone wrong? He went back over the way he had tried to figure out the answer. All planets revolve around the sun, Kevin had said very directly. And this thing with the tail, it also revolves around the sun, only it isn't a planet.
Oh, wait a minute, Harry said to himself. This means that some of the things that go around the sun aren't planets. Okay, so all planets revolve around the sun, but some things that aren't planets do too.
And then Harry had an idea. Look, he said to himself, it's true that all planets are things that revolve around the sun. But it's false that all things that revolve around the sun are planets. So what's the meaning of it? It means that the sentence can't be reversed. If you put the last part of the sentence first, it'll no longer be true. For example, take a sentence like, all oaks are trees. If you turn it around, it becomes all trees are oaks, but it's false.
the example worked. Harry was excited. He decided to try a few more. First he thought of the sentence, all cats are animals. When reversed, it became, all animals are cats. Not true at all, no way, Harry thought. He was delighted.
He tried another sentence. All Frenchmen are Europeans. But then he reversed, but the reverse didn't follow at all. All Europeans are Frenchmen. Definitely not.
Harry was fascinated by his discovery, and he was thrilled when he began to think of what it might mean. For example, if he'd only known it earlier this evening, he might have avoided that awful embarrassment.
Just then he saw Lisa Torrey. Lisa was also in the tail class, but Harry didn't know she took the same subway home each evening as he did. They found 2 seats together when some people got off at the next station.
We talked about what they were getting out of the class and about Kevin, but Harry couldn't keep from telling Lisa what he had been thinking about. I've just had this funny idea, he said, that when you turn sentences around, they're no longer true.
Lisa frowned and wrinkled her nose at the same time, as if to say, "What's so wonderful about that?"
Look, said Harry, give me a sentence, any sentence, and I'll show you.
Lisa continued to look doubtful. But what kind of sentence? I just can't think of any old sentence offhand.
Well, said Harry, a sentence with 2 kinds of things in it, like dogs and cats, or ice cream cones and food, or astronauts and people.
Lisa thought. Then just as she was about to say something and Harry was awaiting impatiently for her to come out with it, she shook her head and thought some more.
Come on, 2 things, any 2 things, Harry begged.
Finally, Lisa made up her mind. No eagles or lions, she announced.
Harry pounced on the sentence the way his cat, Mildew, would pounce on a ball of string that had been rolled towards him. In an instant, Harry had the sentence reversed. No lions or eagles. He was stunned. The first sentence, no eagles or lions, had been true, but so was the sentence when reversed, for no lions or eagles was also true.
Harry was perplexed. It worked before. I don't understand why. He started to say out loud, but he couldn't finish his sentence.
Lisa looked at him wonderingly. Why had she given him such a stupid sentence? Harry thought, with a flash of resentment. But then it occurred to him that, if he had really figured out a rule for all sentences, it would have worked on stupid sentences as well as on sentences that weren't stupid. So it really wasn't Lisa's fault.
For the second time that evening, Harry felt that he had failed. His only comfort was that Lisa wasn't laughing at him. I really thought I had something there, he said to her dejectedly. I really thought I had it.
You tried it out, she asked.
Of
Here.
course.
Her gray eyes set wide apart, were clear and serious.
Of course, Harry responded. He took the sentence like, all trees are oaks, and all cats are animals, and all Frenchmen are Europeans, and found that when the last 2 parts was put first, the sentence were no longer true.
But the sentence I gave you wasn't like yours, Lisa replied quickly. The subway car lurched as they were both jolted momentarily. Then Lisa went on. Every one of your sentences began with the word all, but my sentence began with the word no.
Lisa was right, but could that have made a difference? There was only one thing to do. Try some more sentences that began with the word no. Lisa stood up. My station's coming up next, she said.
Harry was desperately afraid she would get off without trying out her idea. Look, he pleaded with her, let's try it. What about no subway cars or kangaroos?
Lisa grinned. The reverse is also true. No kangaroos or subway cars. And if it's true that no books are ballet dancers, then it must be true that no ballet dancers are books. The train slid into the station, and she was gone before Harry could thank her.
When he got home, he found his kids standing in front of the refrigerator. Harry turned into the conversation. Linda was saying, you know that Miss Bates from next door? Well, every day about the time I come home, I see her going into the liquor store. And you know what? It makes me think about all those people who just can't stop drinking. I wonder if...
Having completed the sentence, Lisa's sentence, you wonder if she's like them.
Linda nodded. Suddenly something in Harry's mind went click, but he restrained himself.
Linda, Tyrone said, with just a hint of exasperation in his voice, just because according to you, all people who can't stop drinking are people who can go into a liquor store, that doesn't mean that all people who go to the liquor store are people who can't stop drinking.
Well, all right, Harry murmured softly, and Tyrone made believe he didn't know his father was pleased.
As for Harry, he sat down at the kitchen table, poured himself a beer, and stared at the foam converting itself into liquid. He felt happier than he had felt in days.
Okay. Now let's talk about that. What's going on in this chapter?
A lot of assumptions.
A lot of assumptions. What are some of the assumptions, Anna?
What's true and what's not.
What's true and what's not. Okay. What is true and what's not? What's true in the story? What's true here?
Like saying like first part of the sentence, you know, one sentence could be true, but if you like reverse it, it'll make it false.
Okay. Can you give me an example? On
Like the sentence says, all dogs are animals, but not all animals are dogs.
all dogs are animals, not okay. So those kinds of sentences, when reversed, become false. Okay. What else?
It's obvious that he wasn't paying attention during the lecture.
He wasn't paying attention in class. That ever happened to you?
Sometimes.
Well, explain that. What happened relevant to that? What was the circumstance?
He was listening. I mean, he was hearing, but he wasn't listening. I mean, like, it was like he was somewhere else when the teacher was lecturing.
Okay, and what caused him to be somewhere else? Do you remember from the story?
The sun. His vision, his like of the sun and all that. He was dreaming of that, like what the teacher was saying.
Okay.
In his mind.
He was said that he was dreaming of what the teacher was saying.
Yeah, in his mind.
Okay. So in a way, he was kind of paying. I mean, at least he wasn't totally. He wasn't thinking about Saturday night. He was thinking about things going that he developed from the class. Okay. What happened then?
They called upon him, and he.
Does that ever happen to you when you're daydreaming or mind wandering? You get called upon. Teachers tend to do that, don't they? They sense that somehow.
Purposely.
What?
Purposely.
Purposely. Okay. What happened then? What did Harry do?
He's trying to gather information.
And he was trying to gather information. He was. And how did he do that, Anna?
By asking Lisa.
Well, okay, but maybe that's a little later.
He means
Or
before.
brainstorming.
He tried
thinking
to fix
about
things by saying something funny, but then again, he realized it wasn't going to be funny when he went ahead and said it to the teacher.
Right, that's serious with a dog star or something like that. Yeah, okay. He was trying to thought about making a joke, but he realized that wasn't probably a good idea. Okay. Then what did he do?
He felt bad, dumb.
He felt bad after what?
After he couldn't answer the question.
Okay. When he answered it incorrectly, he felt bad, dumb. Then he does what?
He thinks about it, about what he answered.
Okay.
He thinks about it and he's trying to figure out how come he didn't get it right.
Okay. Okay. All right. So he thinks about that. All right. We could continue this line of questioning a little bit further, but let me ask you something else. Can anybody here state the rule or put in the form of the rule or what Harry discovered here in this?
Like when you have no at the beginning of the sentence, whether you reverse it or not, it's going to be false all the time.
Okay.
It's like saying no cats or dogs.
Okay. Is the statement no cats or dogs, is that true?
That's true.
Okay, I'm sorry, true.
Okay. Okay.
Either way, it'll
You're
be
thinking
true.
like Harry was. Harry was thinking the other way.
Okay.
That it would work. It would work either way. Like he was saying that all cats are not dogs. I mean, all cats are dogs. And then if you turn it around, all cats, like something like that. He was thinking that.
Okay. Could you say that one more time?
No, I said all cats are dogs.
Okay.
I mean, all cats are not dogs. Okay, and then if you turn it around, all dogs are not cats. Well,
Okay. So one more time. You're getting a little confused.
I can.
It's all right.
I don't forgot where.
Yeah, find it in the text. That's a good
No
thing.
cats or dogs.
No, it says all. Like.
And no dogs or cats.
Okay. If no cats or dogs, if that's true, right?
Okay.
Then the reverse is also true. Does that make sense?
And we have no.
Is that? You
But
get it?
Harry was thinking all oaks are trees, right? He was thinking that all trees are oaks. He was thinking that for the other way too, for no, because he
Okay.
he said that it was false when it was actually true.
Okay. And what happened when he did that? How did
He was like shocked to he was amazed that it wasn't false, that it was true, and he had to go back and rethink his thought again.
Okay. Okay. So can we summarize the rule that was discovered here, or at least dealt with here?
Yeah.
What did Harry? What was the discovery? Assuming that it was a discovery, at least for the moment.
Is it when you're talking about all and it's reversed, it's not going to come out the same.
Okay.
But when you're dealing with no, whether you reverse it or not, it's going to be the same.
Okay. Okay. All right. So if we take an all sentence and reverse it, a true all sentence and reverse it, it remains true. I mean, it becomes false.
becomes false.
See, I confuse myself. But if you take a true no sentence and reverse it, it
It's gonna
remains
stay
true. Okay? That makes sense? Okay. Now let me ask you another question. And you may remember this because I think we may have dealt with this before. Did Harry invent or discover this rule about reversing sentences?
Discovered.
He discovered it. Why did he say that, Ronald?
Because, I mean, maybe in the past somebody has dealt with what he had dealt with before. You know what I mean? Like, the reason I think he discovered is because it was already a rule. It was already discovered. Somebody else had made that rule.
Somebody else had made the rule first and he just discovered it.
But he was asleep during class, so he wasn't.
He wasn't aware.
That's what happened. So when he went back to think on his own, he realized what he had
Okay.
missed.
Are you agreeing with Ronald then?
Yes, because of Lisa too. Lisa, she already knew.
Yes.
Lisa was already like, I already know this.
So you already knew this?
Yeah, she's like this. Like she winked, like she wrinkled her nose and squinted her eyes and all. Like, well, I already know this.
Okay, so you think she already knew it?
Mm-hmm.
Okay. Well, I come back to Santa. If the rule had been discovered, but Harry, let's say in class, like it had been maybe explained in class, and his mind was wandering, he didn't know it. Then when he came to know it, did he discover it or did he invent it, even though it already in existence?
Well, he discovered it himself because he had to think it out. He gave himself all these examples till he finally got it. He said, he discovered it for himself, but he said that someone else had already discovered it.
You mean Ronald didn't, and because Ronald said it is true.
No, I'm not saying
No.
it because he said it is true. No.
Okay. Okay. Any of you taking calculus? If you're taking calculus, who developed calculus? Do you know?
I have no idea.
Okay. I think, and I may be wrong here, and I'll probably hear about it if I am from the audience, but Newton and Leibniz both are responsible for, in a sense, developing calculus at much the same time, although they were independent of one another. Did they then both invent it, or did they both discover it, or did one invent it and the other discover it, or what?
I would say invented.
They both invented.
I would say invented.
They both invented it. Okay. Why, Ron?
Well, nobody ever thought of it before.
Okay.
Oh, go on.
Okay. What if you had invented it some 300 or 400 years later? Or you'd never thought of it before. Would then you be an inventor of calculus just as those guys earlier who had invented it?
Yes.
So you would have been an inventor of it as well. Is that?
Oh, we'll repeat the question. I didn't hear
I'm
that
not
right
trying
there.
to trick you. Okay.
Discover and invent.
You'd be,
Discovered.
you'd be discovered.
Yes.
Okay, why?
Because it was already thought of in the past.
It's already thought of in the past, so it's to be discovered, all right? Everybody agree with that? We have consensus agreement?
You tricked me, that's why.
No, I'm sorry, I didn't mean to trick you, Ron. That wasn't my intent. Okay. Well, all right, let's try to, what does it mean when we say we invent something?
It is thought of for the first
discover.
time.
I'm sorry?
It is thought of for the first
It's
time.
thought of for the first time, okay. And what does it mean to discover something?
You find,
You found something that has already been
Thought of.
invented.
Okay, all right, so you find something that's already there, or, okay. All right, let me, hold on just one second. Let me get back here and get an exercise.
Can I ask you a question?
If I can find it really quickly. Now, I want to ask you some questions, and I want you to tell me whether you think the questions I ask you are discoveries or inventions, okay? And if I don't fall down, we'll begin with this. Electricity, is it a discovery or an invention?
A discovery.
A discovery.
I say discovery. They may have different opinions.
Okay, well, tell us why you say it's a discovery.
Well, because it's like lightning. I mean, it's always been there, and when they discovered electricity, they just learned how to use it. They didn't invent it. They just discovered how to use it. You know, to work around for everybody else to use it.
Okay.
I agree.
Everybody agrees with that? Anybody disagree? I mean, that's certainly fine. I mean, we're not
Can't
trying
fight
to...
with his reasoning.
What? No? Okay. How about an electric light bulb?
that's
an invention.
That's an invention. Okay. So we're all in agreement that electricity is a discovery and an electric light bulb is an invention. Is that correct? Mm-hmm. Okay. How about the Pacific Ocean? Is that a discovery or an invention?
Discovery.
A discovery. Okay. Everybody agree with that?
Mm-hmm.
Okay. Nobody wants. Why do you say so?
Because it's been there.
It's been there.
It was there already.
Someone went and found it.
Somebody went and found it.
Water.
Okay. But when they found it, was it known as the Pacific Ocean?
No.
Okay.
They invented a name for it.
Okay.
But it was discovered.
What
The
the
ocean
name?
itself was discovered.
The body of water.
Okay. How about this one? Anybody want to get anybody wants to argue on that one?
No.
Okay. How about this one? What about X-rays?
An invention.
It's an invention. Why do you say it's an invention?
Because a person can't look through you and just say, okay, this bone is broken. The technology to be able to just see through was an invention itself.
Okay. All right. Now, are you suggesting that the technology was invented?
No, with the use of technology.
Okay. Okay. Does everybody agree with that?
Could be both.
How could it be both?
Well, for one thing, you invent a way to look into the body, and then you discover that it's possible to take X-rays of the inner parts of the body. That's the way I see it.
Okay. I'm sorry. Repeat that one more time. I didn't quite catch it completely.
Okay. What I said was, for when you invent a way, a machine, or a certain way of being able to look into the body. Then secondly, you would discover that it's possible to look in the body, to take pictures of the inner parts.
Okay.
That's where I see it.
Anna?
I disagree with you. You give it to her.
Well, I say it was invented.
I say it was invented because I can't just look through you and say, okay, you have a broken rib. The X-ray was an invention.
Okay.
Well, the reason I say it was invented is because, say nobody ever thought of it, would you think it would be here if somebody didn't think of the X-ray? Like she said, they discovered because they just thought of more ways. That's all it was. But see, if it wasn't for the invention, it wouldn't have been discovered to find new ways.
They first invented it, and then they discovered that it was
So
possible.
then you would consider it an invention, right?
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
In both ways.
She's still insisting it could be both ways.
I don't.
Okay, no, that's okay. Miguel, what were you going to say?
No, I was going to say nothing. I was just agreeing with her.
Okay. Okay, now what's the difference then between an X-ray and an X-ray machine?
An X-ray is the actual using of the X-ray machine.
No, it's a
The
photo of the
photo.
body,
The
of the inner body.
Now, what is a photo of the body?
The inner body. It's a picture of your inner body.
And what does a machine?
The machine is the one that takes the picture, and the X-ray is the X-ray itself. And the picture of you or your inside.
Okay. Okay. So is the machine an invention, or the thing the machine uses an invention?
Both.
Both? Okay. Okay, we might could, we've got a little bit of an argument going on that one, and that's okay. I mean, there's nothing wrong with that. Don't try to, how about this one? Is the city an invention or a discovery?
It's an
invention.
It's an invention. No, it's an.
Because you have to make a city in order to even discover it.
Yeah, but the Indians and the way back.
Discovered.
No, it's more discovered than invented.
Because
Yeah, it is
you have
discovered.
yeah, because you have a group of people who say,
Yeah.
wow,
It's an invention. It's a discovery.
discovered it.
Oh, wait a minute.